Welcome to Two Roads Crossing, a podcast production of the Christian Veterinary Mission. Do you wonder how your faith fits together with your profession? Well, join us as we explore how to live well at the intersection of two roads crossing.
Well, hello and welcome to Two Roads Crossing. My name is Barry Schwenk. I'm a veterinarian, a pastor, and your host as we explore the intersection of faith and veterinary medicine. Last time Dr. Daniel Graham and I were together, we were chatting about the role that veterinarians can fill globally in serving communities with wide varieties of needs, and just how well suited veterinarians are to meet those needs. And we talked quite a bit, I think, last time about intentionality. So I was intentional about asking Dr. Daniel back again so we could continue this conversation. Do you see what I did there? It was like a little
Thanks,
segue.
Barry. That was really good.
Oh, boy. Hey, welcome back.
Thank you.
Things going okay today?
Very good. Yep. Thank you.
I enjoyed our conversation last time, and I just really was challenged about trying to work a little bit more intentionality even into my own life, just with the things that I do, the places where I put my attention. It's a great discipline to develop. But I wanted to talk with you just a little bit more as we talked a lot about the mobilization part of your title as missions mobilization strategist. But now I want to talk a little bit more strategy with you because that the mobilization part, I think I have a pretty good grasp on, but the part now that I want to discuss a little bit more is the strategy part, because we've got this. I don't know if you've noticed, it's a big world out there. So how is it that CVM? How exactly do you know where to send people, how to send people, what to do, all that kind of good stuff?
How do we know where to go and what to do?
Yep.
So I spend a lot of my day thinking about that, and that's why I love my job. It's so much fun to just pray and to research and to think about where we as veterinarians and as an organization can be most useful to the kingdom. So I get the question a lot from people of where do we send people? If I want to go long term, where are you going to send me? Because I'm the first point of contact for people interested in long term service. I get to have this conversation a lot with people, and so there's kind of three ways of approaching that. One is, you as a veterinarian out there, you could come to me and say, I want to go long term, and I have no idea where I want to go. So I get that from people. And so we can sit down and we can talk about where you might be useful. So I do a lot of networking with other mission agencies that are operating around the world, and I collect opportunities where they have a team, a ministry already operating, already functional somewhere, and they have identified a need for a veterinarian to join their team. For whatever reason, for their circumstance, that they feel a veterinarian would be useful. So they contact me and I put it on a list. So I have 90 opportunities on my list right now of other known teams or agencies functioning somewhere around the world that are actively looking for a veterinarian to join their team. So there is no deficit of opportunities. They're out there. So somebody can come to me and say, I don't know where I want to go. Where could I go? I can pull up my list and I can walk you through some of those opportunities, and we see where you might fit, where there's a match. And that's why we talked about last time. I start the conversation with, let me get to know more about you and how God has uniquely created you. What are the skills, the gifts, the abilities that you have? How God has prepared you to serve in ministry. And then I try to match you with one of those opportunities on the list. If God has gifted you with an ability to teach, then we're going to look for a teaching role. If he hasn't gifted you with an ability to teach, we might put those aside for now. We want to find something that matches the skill set that God has given you and prepared you. So that's one way that we can approach it. Another way we can approach it is somebody comes to me and says, I want to go long term with CVM, and I have a good idea of where I want to go already. Maybe they've done short-term work there, or their church has a particular connection with a ministry in another country, and they want to go and serve. So even if it's somewhere where we've never been before, we don't have any connection, we don't know anything about it, we can still make that work. We can explore that relationship, see if there's a good ministry match, a need for a vet, and we can put all the pieces together. We can go that route. So you can come to me and say, I don't know where I want to go. You can come to me and say, I have an idea of where I want to go. We can make it work from either direction. And then kind of a third way that I approach that question is both of those are a little bit reactive. I also approach it from a proactive of saying, where can CVM be most useful in sending vets? And think about it as, I don't know what the connections are. I don't know who we might want to send there. I don't have anybody in mind that's particularly interested, but let me just do some brainstorming and some research and explore where there might be a need. And so I spend a lot of time looking at maps. So I pull up my map and some databases and things where I have information, and I start processing through, okay, where are there significant spiritual needs? So we're always interested in that, in missions and being strategic, where we send people to engage spiritual needs. So areas with unreached people groups that don't otherwise have access to the gospel, or areas of the world that might be evangelized. They might have access to the gospel, but where they're under discipled. There's not strong access to the truth of the gospel and really understanding the depth of the gospel and what grace is. There might be areas where people are under discipled. So I look for those spiritual needs. And there are some good resources for that, like the Joshua Project maintains a database of unreached people groups, for example. And then I look at physical needs. So where can we as veterinarians be useful? Is there a veterinary school? Is there a community with a strong cultural reliance on livestock? Are there communities where there's large numbers of animals or big livestock industries? And then I look for, where do those things overlap? Where is there a need for veterinary services, and where are there strong spiritual needs? I look for the intersection of those, and I say, that is a strategic place for CVM to be working. And then I can look for other ministries that are already working there, and I can go out and I can look for a vet to try to match them to that place.
That's a really unique way of approaching it. And actually, as you were talking, thinking about all the different nuance to that and that spectrum that exists, because you could have a place that has a really strong church presence, but a lack of resource, and so therefore, more of what you may be doing may be more physical development, or you may have a place that has some infrastructure but doesn't have the church background, and so therefore you may lean a different direction, or you have a place that's lacking both, and now you've got double duty that you have to that you have to do. Do you get how easy is it to get lost in that process, strategizing?
It's fun. So you could spend more time on it than is maybe necessary. If you like the research and you like geography and anthropology and the databases and all that, so you could, but there, it is so rich to see the different ways that people are ministering around the world, and so it is really encouraging to be able to look into that. You think of some of these really dark and restrictive places, really challenging places around the world for missionaries to work, and all of a sudden you start doing a little bit of research, and you're finding actually there are ministries that are working here, and that are being successful and thriving. And so that's a real encouragement when you start to put in some of the research and you find some of those things, and you start to identify where God is already moving, and then you see, well, how can we start to engage in that? Another tool that I really like for that process, if you have some free hours and you want to spend some time thinking about this, is this Stratus database. One of our long-term applicants introduced me to this. I wasn't aware of this before as a field worker. Maybe it's a new thing, I don't know. But somebody introduced me to this within the last year, and I've come to really enjoy the Stratus database because it takes the spiritual information, like on the Joshua Project website, where it identifies unreached people groups and where's there significant need for the gospel and discipleship and for churches. So it takes the spiritual aspect and then it combines it with the physical needs. So it gives every country in the world a score in 5 categories. One is spiritual, one's developmental, natural, political, and social. Those are the 5 categories. And it gives every country a score in those 5 categories. And then it gives a total score over all of those. So then you can rank countries in different ways, depending on what parameters you want to look at. So that's where I get a lot of information for creating our strategy is I download livestock population data and I overlay it with Stratus scores of countries with significant physical and spiritual needs. And I see where the overlap is. So for example, I did this recently with pigs. So if I look at total pig population per capita, number 1 country, do you want to guess?
Oh boy.
The largest pig population per capita, per person.
Per person?
I was floored by this. I was really surprised.
Is it the Philippines?
Denmark.
Denmark? Are you serious?
Denmark.
Oh my goodness.
I would have never guessed. So Denmark, largest population of pigs per person.
Wow. Okay.
In Denmark. But when you think about Denmark, is there a lot of, maybe there's some spiritual need there. The gospel is there. The church has been there. Maybe there's some need for depth of discipleship.
Right.
But is there a real physical need in Denmark? I've never been to Denmark, but I can assume probably not.
Right.
So then I can overlay that population data, lots of pigs. I can overlay that with the countries with strong physical and spiritual needs. And I see which countries start to float to the top of the list. Right. And the country that comes to the top of the list is Laos. So high population of pigs per person. So people are really heavily reliant on pig production for their livelihoods, but also really strong physical needs and spiritual needs in that country. So I think, well, maybe that's a country that we need to be talking about. Serbia was another one that floated to the top of that list. Wow. I think, well, maybe that's a country that we need to be talking about. Well, I guess veterinarians can make a difference.
Right. Well, now might be a good time to give you a little bit of a plug, because I know probably by the time that this podcast airs, there will be a new training module on the CVM e-learning platform covering unreached people groups, and part of that training module actually introduces people to those websites and helps teach how to navigate those websites, to be a little bit more intentional about how to pray, how to develop strategy for outreach. And so I would encourage folks that are listening to check out the CVM e-learning page and look for the Unreached People Group course, because that would be a great place to start. Now, once you kind of have got this idea, right? You've got this idea where you have a place that may have some needs. How do you develop then the work strategy? What is it that you actually, once you get in country, how do you decide what you're going to do? Or if someone's coming to you and saying, Daniel, oh, great strategist, what should I do as I go forth from this place? No one says that. They should. We should make it a thing. How should I go forth and do what thou biddest? So how do we decide? Like, how do you decide what to do once you get to the ground?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, a lot of that is dependent on how God has wired you, how God has prepared you and gifted you for ministry. So some of it is on the worker side, and some of it is on the community side, the environment that you're going to. What is the particular need there, and where are those things going to overlap and match? Like I said, if the need isn't teaching, we're going to try to send a teacher. And if the need isn't teaching and you don't have skills in teaching, well, we might find a better fit for you somewhere else. So what are people going to do overseas? When I think about our workers and kind of the big picture categories of what they fit into, there are three categories that really are consistent themes for our field workers and where veterinarians can be useful overseas. I think about those as university ministry, number one, number two, community development, and number three, clinical services for church planting. Those are three areas where I think veterinarians are extremely useful and where we see a lot of our current workers engaging in ministry.
So let's just tackle each one of those so that way we can get an idea, maybe generically speaking, on what a general ministry overview might look like. So if someone happens to wander into your office, has some fairly good giftings in teaching, maybe has a passion for teaching, and when you start talking about university ministry, what does that kind of look like on a day-to-day basis?
Investing in discipleship relationships with the next generation of veterinarians is extremely powerful, whether it's in the US or whether it's overseas. Investing in student ministry is never going to lead you astray. It's never going to be the wrong approach to take. So yeah, university ministry overseas can look a number of different ways. It could be a veterinary school. It could be a vet tech school or vet assistant school, or it could just be an agriculture school or a school that teaches biological sciences or other agricultural things that a vet could be useful in. Or actually another category is there are some seminaries overseas that are interested in having vets come and teach it as part of the seminary programs to equip their pastors and church planners with practical agricultural skills to be able to use those in ministry. So to go into unreached communities as a church planner with an agricultural skill to engage people in that community. Or the flip side of that would be maybe as a church planner, they just need a way of providing for their family. It is unique in the US that we have the ability to pay our pastors salaries.
Right.
For the majority of the world, that is just not the case. So with the pastors that I trained in Uganda, we had a tent making class in our Bible school. And the first day of that class, I would get up and say, I hate to disappoint you, but nobody's going to pay you to do the work that we're training you to do. The communities that you go to, you're probably not going to be drawing a big enough salary to provide for your family. So what are you going to do to provide for your family? And in most places, that's going to be subsistence level agriculture. So that's another good university category that some of our vets could be really useful in. So engaging in student ministry at any of those levels, building relationships of trust with students, especially in an unreached environment or in a restrictive access nation, we have the ability to come in as a professional and to work in a university setting and to build relationships with students in order to share the gospel. Leading Bible studies with students, taking students on outreach events. A lot of veterinary schools in underdeveloped countries, like in Uganda, we had a friend who served at the veterinary school there, and they just have no access to practical skill-based education. A lot of lecture, a lot of classroom work, memorization, but no hands-on skill work. And so we would take students from the university and take them out into the countryside and do spay neuter practicals with them.
Mm.
And for most of them, that was their only opportunity to do surgery while they were in school.
Wow.
So
Well,
yeah, a lot. The other thing I wanted to make sure I add, because I know there are people listening to this thinking that's good for somebody else.
Right.
That's good for somebody with a PhD or board certification.
That was gonna be my question.
And you know, that's probably true in the States. There's this kind of high standard for academic credentialing to teach in a veterinary school in the US. For the majority of the rest of the world, that's just not going to be the case. A DVM is going to go a long way in a lot of countries. And in Uganda, they used the British education system. It was a British colony. And so they provide a bachelor's of veterinary medicine in the university there. And so a doctor of veterinary medicine on paper looks really good. And practically speaking, what what is offered in our veterinary schools is going to be is not going to compare strongly to what they're offering in their school. And so a vet with a good foundation in clinical medicine in the States is going to be well prepared to serve in vet schools in a lot of these countries that we're talking about.
And it seems like, you know, just over the last however many years, you know, this is something that from a university standpoint, I've seen folks do this on a short-term basis, go in and teach seminar classes, folks, you know, going down to Haiti and teaching for a couple of weeks and then coming back. I've heard of folks going for an entire semester. You've got board certified folks that will go and teach a seminar class on ultrasonography or surgery. We have small animal vets, exotic vets, large animal vets, people that are there long-term, people that are there short-term. I don't think that there's opportunities no matter where you fit in that. There is an opportunity. And even, you know, even talking about doing some online training for veterinarians internationally is also an option through CVM. So you don't even have to necessarily even leave the United States to develop relationships with people internationally. And just teaching basic things like basic clin path, talking about doing skin scrapings. I mean, any number of things, you know, there's a real need. And so it provides a great opportunity. How is that, you know, then different from like a community development or a clinical setting for like church planting?
So community development is really where I get excited. That's my passion. That's my area of interest, and that's a lot of the work that I did in Uganda. So community development is working together with individuals and groups of people in a community to help them identify their needs and then what resources that they have to meet their needs, and helping to empower them to accomplish those goals and objectives. So it's not me coming in and doing something for them or introducing all of the solutions, or me going in and pointing out everything that's wrong, but it's me walking together in relationship with people in the community to help facilitate the process of what's going on, and just to ask the right questions, or to maybe point in a different direction to help them achieve their goals, and to live according to how God has created them, and to flourish in the way that God has blessed them. That's how I think about community development. So how can we do that as veterinarians? I worked in a lot of rural areas, village settings in Uganda. And so a lot of my focus was just really basic livestock husbandry training. So working with subsistence level farmers on what are what are you seeing with your animals? What are the needs? Where are you seeing a deficit, and where can we work together to overcome some of those challenges? So I would just do a lot of really basic training on housing, on nutrition, on water. Really, you should just give your goat some water. That's going to solve a lot of your problems. On if they're identifying, Uganda's really good about identifying parasitic diseases, a lot of tick-borne diseases in Uganda. So if that's what they're identifying, talking through, okay, what can we do about that? What are the dewormers that are available in the market? How can I do? How do you inject those things? Can I walk you? Can I help you through the process of how you can administer that medication? How should you be spraying your animals for ticks? What's the frequency of that? Just talking with people through those things, really basic things that can make some significant impacts in their lives. So a lot of livestock husbandry training. I did a lot of livestock distribution of economic assets into the community so that people had an asset that they could use to provide for the needs of their own family. So they wouldn't be dependent on other inputs from outside. They had something of their own that they could use to provide for their family. Let me give you an example of that one. I think this is an interesting story. There was a community that I worked with in southwest Uganda, right on the side of a volcano. So really beautiful location. We had to climb up this volcano to this community, and several years before COVID. That's my timing.
Right.
Pre-COVID, we had
BC.
we had done a sheep distribution. We had provided some training on sheep because that was what the community identified that they wanted. I had a different idea of what I thought they should do, and they said no. We want to do sheep, and so it was a community-driven idea. I helped to facilitate that. Did some training for them through the church. Was able to have the church provide some sheep for the community. Everything was going on well. COVID hit. I didn't get down there to visit them for quite a while. Came back a year later and visited them and said, okay, what's going on with the sheep? And they were really upset with themselves and were really embarrassed to talk to me about what happened. And so I asked them questions, what happened? They said, well, during COVID, things were really tough. There was no food. People were not allowed to move out of the community to go and access food. People were really having a hard time. Nobody was earning any money because they couldn't go and work for other people digging in their gardens. And so we ate all the sheep. So we're really sorry about that. And I said, don't at all be sorry. That the point of this program was we wanted to provide you with an economic asset so that you could meet your own needs, so that you could provide for your families when the need arose. And that's exactly what happened. A need arose, things got difficult for you during COVID, and you had the capacity, because of the way that the church had built into your life, you had the capacity through your sheep asset to provide for your need. You sold it, you ate it, whatever it was, and you met your need, and you're here today because of that. Right. So that's I love that story because that's my interest in communities is helping them with the tools that they need to meet their own needs.
And that's really, it's challenging for many people to engage in that level, because a lot of times you want to come in. There are a lot of rusted out tractors on the side of the road in Ethiopia because of this, right? Everyone comes in and has these great big ideas what they're going to do, and but walking alongside someone in community is, again, talking about relationship, and something that veterinarians do so well is also having to protect that trust, working with people in order to meet their own needs to the point where eventually what you want for Dr. Daniel to be gone for a year or 2 years, and for things to continue on, and for there to be ownership within the community for sustainability. And so that's a real challenging, but yet also a very satisfying and blessed kind of a work. How would that then differ with this, with the idea of clinics for church planting?
Yeah, so clinical services, and I could just say clinical services, but I always add on clinical services for church planting, because it's not just about us going in with our veterinary skills. spaying and neutering animals, vaccination programs, rabies campaigns. We did a lot of vaccination for Newcastle in Uganda. There would be huge population wipeouts from Newcastle every year as diseases moved through the poultry populations. So it's very easy for us to come in and provide a clinical service, but that's not our end goal as Christians, right? Just to provide to meet a physical need. Our goal in all things, in our personal life and our professional life, wherever we are in all spheres, is to point people to Christ, and to share the gospel verbally through the activities that we are engaged in. So I always like to put those things together and call it clinical services for church planting. Church planting meaning evangelism, discipleship, however we're building into the church.
Right.
So this is a really good avenue for veterinary missions in areas where we really have to lean into building that trusting relationship. Barry, we talked a lot about the ability of veterinarians to build a relationship of trust around that animal patient, and for us to be able to connect with the owner of that animal. That is a skill that veterinarians really have, the ability to engage with people, and to bring them on board on the treatment plan, on whatever we're doing. We can't just treat that animal in isolation of the owner. It's bringing them on board with what we're doing. So clinical services for church planting really leans into that in areas where it's challenging to build those relationships otherwise. So I get contacts from a lot of different mission agencies that say, we have a team working with a nomadic people group. They're already there. We got the pastors, we got the church planners, we got the Bible translators. They're already there on the ground. They're not connecting with people. People don't trust them. They're not engaging in the community. The community's interest is around their livestock, around their animals. We need a vet to come in and help this team build relationships with the community so that they can engage in the ministry that needs to be done there. So nomadic peoples, rural village settings, anywhere where you have people's livelihood and culture really centered around their animals, we can provide clinical skills, the vaccination programs, the treatment programs, the open air clinics, spay and neuter campaigns, whatever it is. We can use those veterinary services as a tool to build relationships for evangelism, discipleship, and church planting.
Those opportunities, and when we talked the very first time, we talked about how well suited veterinarians were just for being able to make those connections and those relationships. And then when you think through all the strategy of global impact, and then the opportunities that we have as veterinarians to meet those needs, and to be kind of kingdom workers, kingdom thinkers. It's just it's amazing to see how well suited we are, going all the way back to 1976 when Dr. Dormany, first kind of felt compelled to put those two things together, and then here we are, and so many years later, and see how the work just continues to grow and continues to grow. And I would encourage folks that were listening today. I realize we're kind of out of time, but there are so many opportunities. And as you're listening to this, it may very well be that God is pressing on your heart to and nudging you in a direction. We've got some wonderful people like Dr. Daniel Graham, who professionally, I heard that you're a strategist. So yeah, so we got people that are willing to come alongside and have those conversations with you, just to help you, having been there, having done that, gone through it personally, and now, helping others to be able to go through. That's what the body's all about anyway. I would encourage you. I would encourage you to reach out. I would encourage you to take one of those online courses about unreached people groups, learn how to navigate through some of those websites, become more familiar and have a deeper understanding of the needs in this world, and also how God has uniquely gifted you to be used to help meet those needs for his honor and for his glory. I think that when you learn how to take your gift, the profession that you have been called to use in a way that honors God, that's when we begin to learn how to live well at the intersection of two roads crossing.
Thank you for listening to Two Roads Crossing, a podcast production of the Christian Veterinary Mission. If you were blessed by this content, like and subscribe so that you are alerted when new content is released. If you would like more information about CVM, or if you have questions, comments, or topical suggestions, you can find us online at www.cvm.org. Or you can contact us by emailing podcast@cvm.org. God has a plan for the nations, and that plan includes you. We pray that CVM has encouraged you to live out your calling with confidence and competence. So, until next time, may the voice of the shepherd ring loud and clear as you follow him in faith to the intersection of two roads crossing.